In 2008, I recall the beginnings of the housing market bubble collapse. Remember that? At the time, I was in senior leadership at a large church, and the senior pastor chose to create a sermon called Living with Certainty in an Uncertain World. Now, little did I know, just a few short months later, my wife and I would experience firsthand what it means to be laid off from a job. It happened. Now, this began a 2-year journey in our lives where we discovered new concepts of humility and determination ultimately. During this time, our oldest child was under 2 years of age, and by the end of the season, we welcomed our second child into the world. It comes without saying that we had a tremendous amount of questions in our heads as to what we were supposed to be doing at the present time, or where we were supposed to be going, or how we were supposed to get there. Now, there were many nights as I was trying to teach my daughter how to sleep in her own bed. I laid on the floor in her room, looking up into a dark ceiling, asking questions such as, what am I supposed to do? Or looking up at God, God, what are you doing? Night after night, over and over in my head, for almost 2 solid years, the questions never seemed to be answered. I waited, because that is what I understood the Christian was supposed to do with their Christian walk. In times of these types of situations, you sit and wait. I had no clue how to move forward. I saw no doors ahead of me, and I had no plans developed for me in order to proceed into a future that would be dependable or sustainable for me, or my wife, and of course our growing family. I recall vividly the moment in time that this changed for us. My wife had just informed me that our second child was on the way. With excitement, we actually finally had a goal in the future that wasn't decided by our own minds. I mean, God chose to give us a new gift. And I knew at that moment, and I might have even said it out loud, well, something has to change now. Hey guys, and welcome to Godly Guy Stuff, a group for guys here to connect and collaborate on how we as men can have a stronger impact on our lives and the lives of those who depend on us. If you're a guy who struggles through life like me, you're wondering how to find opportunities, create godly paths, knock on a door in front of you, make sure that you subscribe to be part of this place, a place that produces content for an iron sharpens iron environment. Now, with the revelation that we now had a second child on the way, that changed the perspective for me personally. I'm not sure why I had it in my head that I had to wait on God to reveal a new opportunity for us, but until we realized a new child was coming, I wholly admit I was stuck. I thought I was doing, the good little Christian thing, to be patient and to wait, seeking God's desire for where we were supposed to go. Honestly, I'm not sure that was the wrong thing to do at the time or any time. We as Christians are called to follow God's will for our lives. Now, there is a tremendous amount of story that I'm honestly glossing over with this time of our lives, and there were many other factors that were in play at this time. But for the topic of today, the part I want to focus on is that at this time, my mentality seemed very unfounded. I did not have much security in the situation that we were in. I didn't see any pathway forward or for making a more secure route. In my head, I didn't even see a door to knock on. But the realization that my son was on the way, that spurred me on and demonstrated to me that it truly means to have an active waiting period. You need an active waiting period in a person's life. I wish I could say that after this revelation that life got easier. In reality, the opposite was true. Life got harder, much harder. Now, even though I had a new determination about me, the world still had a different perspective on moving forward into a new chapter of life. Refusing to acknowledge reality. From my perspective back in 2008 to 2009, 2010, the Christian life and all its complexities interlaced with today's society, it really deepened for me. For any other Christian's perspective, I had a very solid upbringing in Christianity. My father, I've mentioned before, he was being a pastor. He demonstrated a strong family lifestyle with security enveloped within the Bible. We had an assurance based in the faith that God had the best intentions for us, whether we understood that or not. Yet, with that being said, for me personally, I saw this as a situation kind of similar to Oliver holding up his bowl, asking for more. To me, a good Christian should always seek God's will for him or herself, which meant we should wait on God to reveal that to us. This concept of waiting in my head had evolved into an individual who was removed from the decision-making process. For me, this freed me from any consequences associated with decisions, or so I thought. Of course, this all changed when I lost my job. I very much was feeling the consequences of decisions being made, either by myself or by others, and what I thought at the time by God. This did produce a large amount of anger and resentment against practically anybody and everyone in front of me at the time. And this anger was sent in God's direction as well. I had followed all the rules. I had made all the right decisions, as far as I was aware. I was telling myself, here I am, jobless, living on food stamps, and completely devoid of motivation to seek a new road. Now another child was on the way? God, you messed up. On top of this, the church that I was a part of was of little help. The housing bubble collapsed into the recession, as we all know, and many other people were in similar situations. This struggle was only one piece that instigated a church split, which is how I lost my job. I had tried my best to remain neutral, but as many of you are aware, there is no Switzerland in a church split. The winning side, the ones who are allowed to stay in the buildings, they deemed me a threat. And of course, I was unceremoniously ushered out the door. What this meant was that in one action, we not only lost our income, but we also lost our church family. Church splits can have devastating impacts on people's lives. With this split specifically, we even had a church elder who was a very well-respected individual. He took his own life. During this split, his wife had suddenly passed away. One of the last things he ever said to me was, I have lost my wife, my pastor, and my church all at once. After he said this, and when I lost my job, I fell into my own struggles. Now, I received a voicemail from him saying he wanted to talk and he simply wanted to help me with my issue. In my anger with the world, I chose to ignore his call. I did not realize he was actually seeking help for himself. And a few days later, he was gone. The reality that I was facing was too hard for me to initially understand. I didn't want to accept the responsibilities that I had in front of me at the time. And believe me, I wrestled God for quite a while. Getting up and taking a step. My experience that I encountered back in 2008 and beyond is honestly a horrible example of what I'm trying to talk about today. Many times I have wondered and contemplated where life would have been if I had chosen a different plan, or something beyond simply sitting and exerting no effort on my behalf. Granted, there are moments and times where this is a proper course of action. Yet I will state I was in the wrong for not exerting effort. A life lived on faith does not equate in action. If you are finding yourself in a position where you are not actively waiting, as I've discussed in past videos, then I would suggest you're probably missing something very important. Even in our seasons of being still, there is a concept of action in play. Now this sounds like an oxymoron and doublespeak, and I do understand that I'm borderline of that, but hear me out, okay? In Hebrews 11, we have an entire chapter of examples for a life of faith. Now, in the middle of the examples, we find verses 13 through 16. All these died in faith, without receiving the promises, but having seen them and having welcomed them from a distance, and having confessed that we were strangers and exiles on the earth. For those who say such things make it clear that they are seeking a country of their own. And indeed, if they had been thinking of that country from which they went out, they would have had opportunity to return. But as it is, they deserve a better country, that is, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. The challenges for this week, they're packed within these verses. In verse 13, we see our examples. They had confessed that they were strangers and exiles on the earth. Therefore, challenge number 1, realize the reality of our earthly situation. The cliche phrase we are all used to is, the world is not our home. And I wholly admit that we've become too accustomed to saying these words without really, truly realizing the meaning, the depth within these words. In many aspects, we feel entitled to the luxuries of the American culture. So much so that when these luxuries are pulled away from us, such as the job loss, we feel unjustly persecuted. But in reality, we should hold no unrealistic expectations to what is available to Christians here on earth. What opportunities are entitled to a stranger? What should be available to an exile? Anything beyond these levels would be deemed potentially frivolous in the eyes of God. Yet, if you do receive anything beyond a stranger or what an exile would receive, we should consider ourselves blessed. Challenge number 2. Now, this one will present itself in some very difficult situations. Actively seek your own country. What is the action in the word seek? Now, here in Hebrews, the phrase they are seeking is epizateo, which, as one would expect, translated to, means to inquire for, seek for, search for, or seek diligently. Yet, the definition does dig deeper and also includes to wish for, crave, and to demand or clamor for. Godly guys, we have lost the true understanding of what it means to seek in today's culture. This does not entail asking a smart device a question. It does not mean looking it up on the internet. This goes much deeper than a tepid reaction. Let me ask you this question. How have you searched for your missing keys while you're running late for an appointment? Or for you godly dads, when you do a kid count and you come up one short, what is your immediate reaction? There is a sense of urgency, excitement, dread, longing, and even an insistent demand upon these types of actions. Do you have a process for seeking God's will for your life that involves urgency or excitement or dread, longing, or even an insistent demand? Or is your desire of God's will easily distracted by a notification on your phone? I'm not trying to belittle the components of your life, but as I've stated, this is a challenge, honestly, for each of us to work on. Now, before we get to the final challenge, I want to highlight the next passage in Hebrews. It states that our examples, the examples in Hebrews, were always moving forward and even appear to have like an absence of any type of rear view mirror. We should see this as a warning to make sure our focus is in the right direction. If we don't have the proper direction, there is a strong desire to return from where we came from. If we have the proper direction, God is not ashamed to be called our God. Think about that for a moment. According to the scripture, we can safely deduce that there are Christians in this world, or in the past, possibly ourselves, in which God has been ashamed to be called their God or our God. Now, keeping our focus on Him and instead being distracted by obstacles ahead of us or places we have visited now have an interesting consequence. Just as a parent is ashamed and even embarrassed by their child when the child acts up, God will admit his shame in us if we lose our focus. Wow. Now let's end on a happy note with the end of verse 16. For he has prepared a city for them. Our struggles have an end date. They will not be eternal. Though our feelings and our emotions will state otherwise, God makes the claim that one day we will have a place prepared for us, specifically for each of us. Now, this is our assurance that we are to cling to. When you are in the midst of a struggle, a burden, or a crisis, do not sit down and simply refuse to move forward like I did. Most opportunities or doors, they're not going to present themselves without us having an active focus that is needed in order to see the opportunity. If you're in this position today, begin taking steps. And yes, many of the steps might be in the wrong direction. They might lead to a roadblock. They might lead to a hill or even a wall. But if you continue seeking, craving, demanding that you gain understanding, all while focused on God, He will navigate you in the right direction. Wrap up. Yeah, of course, no one has the ability to foresee the future, and the last 3 years have clearly demonstrated we as a culture see no way out of the chasm, and instead we're continually offering each other shovels to dig deeper. Godly men, we have to reject this methodology. While we do that, we also have to repel the desire to simply expect God to solve all these problems without us being the tools used in the moment. We each have an active role to play in today's society, and that includes our own personal walk. If you are finding yourself in a situation where doors not only are not opening, but are non-existent, begin taking steps forward. The knowledge of your direction is not required. The focus of your vision is. This is the key to opening doors for your future. Now it's your turn. All right, what did I miss today? Am I completely wrong here? Does God mean something different than actively waiting when He says in Psalms 46:10? He says, "Be still and know that I am God." Or can we clearly cling to Him in an active moving situation without knowledge of where our next step will lead us? Maybe. Can we have a faith that is truly sight unseen? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for listening throughout the entire video today, and please definitely follow me or subscribe to Godly Guy Stuff, the group on Gab. Gab is the launching headquarters for the content that is produced for Godly Guy Stuff. So if you're watching this on another platform, on YouTube, on Facebook, if you saw the link on Twitter, you're missing a lot more content that's on Gab. There's also a Godly Guy Stuff Locals community where I post more personalized content for upcoming videos. You can find even more videos, possibly sneak peeks. Eventually, ever so often, deeper personal connections is what I'm hoping. And future casting for upcoming ideas. So if you want to see what I'm currently working on, you go to Gab. For upcoming topics, you head on over to Locals. The links are in the descriptions. And you know what? I look forward to talking to you and having the conversation continue. Thanks.